Okay, well, you know what? It is time. So I'm going to assume that some of our other folks will join us in progress. To let the dinging surprise you. um, I don't know if Bob ever got to see the list, but it's a nice list of our state associations across the country, and I'm really pleased with that. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because I know everybody has got their regular work that you need to get back to, and it's great that you're able to spend a little time with COSMA before we get there. My name is Ruth Ann Rugg. I am the transitional leader for COSMA, and I also work part-time for the Texas Association of Museums, and it is through the Texas Association that we are borrowing their webinar platform. And in addition to that, we're also borrowing the brains behind it. That's Jennifer Coleman. She won't put her picture up here, but I assure you, if we get into any kind of trouble, she will be the one who solves the problem. We're talking about advocacy today. It's always a good time to talk about advocacy, but now is when we're beginning to really think about it. The museum's Advocacy Day, our national event that AAM organizes, is at the very end of February, and that's coming up. And I know in my state, our legislative session begins at the end of January, so we're thinking about it on a state level as well. There's always time to do advocacy locally, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. We came up with the idea for this particular webinar because most of us are aware of what happens on a federal level, but a lot of us don't think so much about the role that SMAs can have in encouraging advocacy for their state. We know that legislators on whatever level really listen to the people who vote for them. So it makes a big difference if you can have the people who vote for them come and help with your cause. So for today's session, I have recruited a couple of experts. Bob Beatty, who many of you know from his work with AASLH. He is a community engagement specialist and a frequent speaker and an author and newly minted PhD. So from here on out, we are going to address him as Dr. Bob. So everybody kind of play along with that, Dr. Bob. Bob is coming to us today from Nashville, and I'm really grateful that he could make time to do this. He's doing this for free because he believes in COSMA and what we're doing. So if you see him next time at a conference or something, be sure and tell him thank you. I know he's done a lot of work for other state associations, and so you all, I mean, you may know Bob, he may be like an old friend. So our other old friend is Johnna McEntee, who is the executive director of the Ohio Museums Association. And we asked Johnna to do this, not because she's the president of the COSMA Foundation, although she is, but because she does some interesting things in Ohio for advocacy. And a lot of things that we talk about in planning events and trying to organize efforts sounds so daunting and intimidating. And what Johnna does actually sounds doable. So I asked her to come on and talk to us about being doable. So with just that much as an introduction, I'm going to click my little X up here so you don't see me anymore. And Johnna's going to click hers, and then we're with Bob. So thank you.
Okay, so everybody's frozen. I'm guessing I am not here. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do my spiel here. Honestly, I see why you guys turned off your cameras. That's why you're frozen. So thank you for that wonderful introduction, Ruth Ann. I am really happy to do this. I believe so much in the cause. I believe very much in what y'all do specifically. I'm setting my stopwatch right now so I know where I am time-wise. I do carry the banner for advocacy on an ongoing, regular basis in a lot of places. It's been part of my work for a very long time. So I appreciate Ruth Ann for having me, and Jennifer for doing the behind the scenes work. And you know, the big thing I want to start with is I think advocacy is one of two major issues that's facing our field right now. The first one, well, advocacy being one, the other one is diversity and inclusion. And I've written a little bit about this, and I'm pretty tireless about this one too, in terms of racial and ethnic inclusion in the things that we do. Both of these, though, are parts of the sustainability equation. And that's an important thing to remember, is our job, our role is sustainability. Ultimately, that's what we're doing in our work. And I've long said, Ruth Ann knows this, I've long said that small museums, I'm sorry, not small museums, state museum associations and small museums are the backbone of the entire advocacy effort. And so I'm going to do a kind of a combination, session with you guys for about 30 minutes here, go through a few things, and then I'm gonna introduce a tool to you. Can I make sure everybody can hear me? Looks like it. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start the slideshow here just a little bit. So we're going to talk about advocacy today. Is there somebody can jump on real quick and just verify you can hear me before I keep going?
All good.
Yay, thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about advocacy. What I'm trying to do is I need to turn off my webcam. Nobody needs to see me right now. But I think if I share my screen, you don't see my webcam, do you? Let's turn this off. Okay, forget it. We're just going to show the application. We'll go from there. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is talk a little bit about what advocacy is. And I think it's important to really think about this. I often think about advocacy as the umbrella term for a lot of things. So the nonprofit, the independent sector calls it a broad term covering a range of activities that seek to bring about systemic social change. Now, you could probably pull social out because we often think about that in big ways, but it's systemic change in the social sector, not necessarily in the business sector or economic sector or something like that. It is a pretty broad term, but advocacy is as well. So what I want to do is let's take it apart a little bit. And sort of look at underneath, underneath the framework that we're working with. So whenever you're thinking about advocacy, really, I want y'all to think about it in a really broad way: educating, explaining, speaking out, gathering support, promoting. Now, and this is key, either directly or through your allies. Now, when we're talking about this today, I really want you to think about how to get your allies, get your constituents in your states a little more engaged in this on the global level. So that's where we have allies about an issue that you care about. And in our case, it is the importance of museums to American communities. Now, I really want to say now, advocacy is not lobbying. I want to hammer this message home today, and it's really something that I want you to carry with. It's fusion that I've heard a lot in my time working on the national arena. And everybody thinks about advocacy nearly exclusively. I shouldn't say everybody. Most people think exclusively in terms of going to Capitol Hill. And then they think, oh my gosh, I can't lobby, or I shouldn't be lobbying, or whatnot. A lot of people use the term advocacy and lobbying interchangeably. And it's really important to know, not all advocacy is lobbying, but all lobbying is advocacy. Lobbying is just one tool or approach. So the one way that I think about advocacy, one way to remember lobbying is usually lobbying, not usually, lobbying is really in direct support or opposition to something very specific: a bill, a law, a referendum, a ballot measure. This is how I remember it. And by the way, this is I looked up famous people with bad memory, and Albert Einstein actually came up. Not necessarily this picture, but I just used this picture because it always makes me laugh. But I remember advocacy as advocacy equals all. Anything you're doing when you're making your case for something. Lobbying is more, lobbying deals with law or legislation. And that's how literally how I remember it, it's the simplest way to do it. So there's a specific rule there for the two. Now, the biggest thing is you honestly, you need to know the rules. And by the way, I hope there's some giggles when you see this sign. Lord only knows what this sign means. But broad advocacy is something all of us can do. It includes a lot of different tactics and approaches to educate and inform on important issues that are not necessarily tied to influencing legislation. And this includes educating policymakers, the media, the public. It includes building relationships with policymakers over time, as long as you're not asking them to vote one way or another. That's when it becomes lobbying. And by the way, there are no limits on 501c3s about advocating in a broad sense above, unless rules state otherwise. So those of you who are working for state or public agencies, if you are, your constituents who are, they need to be careful about this. And the only thing I would tell you is just tell them to check with their check the rules. There is no limit on advocacy, and honestly, there's a limit on it. There's limits on how much you can do in certain ways, where advocacy becomes more about lobbying on a regular basis. But we will never hit that in our field. I can't imagine the way that we do. So why do we advocate? I mean, these are the easiest ways to think about it. And really my goal, what I carry with me all the time, is the need to, I call it the steady drumbeat of advocacy. It's what I teach to my students. It's what I do when I do workshops on advocacy. You need to do things constantly so that we're working toward making the case for what we do. So we advocate for things like mission advancement, to promote important issues, to ensure we're able to continue to do our work efficiently in a way that works best for us. We advocate so we have friends and supporters as we go, and we can cultivate them for help. We advocate a lot of times to help those who don't have a voice have a voice. Now, in your case, at a state museum association, think about some of those small community nonprofits that you work with and around, or the small community museums. You give them power, and you help them have power as well as what power they give to the people in their communities as they work through. Other ways we do this is we advocate to change hearts and minds. We advocate to put good policies in place. There's a lot of reasons that we do this, and if you're ever looking for some ammunition to get your audience and constituents to do this, the museums in your state, this is how to do it. This is a quote I like to use as well. There's a mystique surrounding advocacy that you have to be an expert on your issue or an expert in the way the process works. Not so. Advocacy is like anything else. Beginners are not expected to know as much as professionals, and the more you do it, the easier it gets. The simple truth, honestly, y'all, is advocacy is pretty easy. It's a lot easier than we think it is. My thing is, I think we need to reframe our thinking. And I want to give you guys some examples of how advocacy is really something we've all been doing since elementary school. So the first thing we learn in elementary school is that advocacy happens everywhere. First graders, let's say, don't use the term advocacy or lobbying, but when you listen to their conversations, you realize that they're practicing advocacy all the time. For example, I got my mom to let me stay up late last night to watch a movie. Or in a classroom, hey, we got the teacher to give us an extra 10 minutes for recess. Now, it's nonprofits, and I'll say museums in this case, right? We're already advocating before a variety of audiences just like that. We go to funders to persuade them to invest in our ideas and programs. We go to volunteers and we motivate them to give their time and energy, their greatest treasure, to us as we work through. I often say that advocacy, fundraising, and community engagement are all branches of the same tree. What changes is the currency, quote unquote. In a fundraising situation, you are going to a funder asking them, you're going to a funder telling them how you help them solve a problem that they want to solve, and you're asking them to give you money, literally. When you do community engagement, you're going to them and saying, hey, join us. You organization have a need. I museum can fit that need. Let's work together on do a program or something like that. Advocacy is the same way. You, policymaker, have a cause that you like to work on. I, museum, need your help. I'm sorry, help serve that cause in this certain direction. Please give us your support. Sometimes that's in terms of money, sometimes it's just in terms of support. Okay, another part of the advocacy equation. Oh, I'm sorry, let me back up and continue on this slide. If nonprofits are as smart as first graders, we will remember that advocacy happens everywhere there are people. So don't assume you've got to travel to Congress to be an advocate. Honestly, I think you can be most effective at state and local levels of government. And y'all, with your connections with museums in your state, can get to city and county commissioners, state representatives and state senators, as well as any number of people in official sort of government boards and task forces and stuff like that. Now, this does not mean you don't go to an advocacy day. I think it's a great opportunity that everybody should try at least once in their life. But one of the most untold resources, I think, in our field is the Invite Congress to Your Museum Week that happens during the August recess for Congress. I think, honestly, I think the COSMA audience, I think the state museum associations can really hit that hard, because if you're getting people from Congress to your community institutions, they're going to remember you later. And the other thing I want to tell you about that is city and county commissioners. Something that I heard a couple years ago that really resonates with me is today's school board members and city commissioners are tomorrow's U.S. congressmen. So they're going to remember you on their way up through the food chain. So you should pay attention to that possibility. Second thing, leverage matters. And we should be calling on our natural allies to help us as we go forward. So, you know, using again the first grade example, the seesaw, you remember the seesaw, the side with the greatest weight goes down while the lighter side can flip up and fly off, right? Or in tug of war, side with the greatest weight wins, or the greatest leverage. Likewise, think about our automatic strengths and weights that we have in numbers. More than anything, our allies, our staff, our board, our members, our volunteers, our funders, our clients, etc., as we go through. So the thing we have to think about in terms of advocacy is looking for ways to get more people on our side through the media. Social media is a wonderful tool for this, honestly. Relationship building and partnerships. We want to maximize the weight on our side of policy positions. And I'm going to say, y'all, we did not and have not done a good job of that as a field over the years. One reason we're kind of in the position we're in, although I'm seeing things starting to trend up, is that we were not good advocates for our cause for a very, very long time. I think it's really telling the strong support the NEA, the NEH, and IMLS have received the last couple years when the president's budget has zeroed them out. And it got under the United States Congress. That says something. That says something about how important our work is, and we have to continue to build on that. Okay, the next one. Experience adds value. So first graders, you know, when they're picking players, although some of us, and I am one who were one of the last people when they were picked, when picking players for kickball, or in this case, I don't think they're actually picking players. I think they're choosing who gets the puck first. But for the next game of kickball, captains normally select first those who are known to be good, or who they think would be better based on size, speed, or agility. And oftentimes you see kids, if you will, practicing building skills on the playground as they go through. Likewise, those of us in museums, we seek proven or experienced staff, board, and volunteers, so that when we're engaging in advocacy, we need to pay attention to those talented players, because advocacy is a team sport. So we practice our advocacy skills by watching others, getting training, and seeking experience. And this is one example. So if we're smart, if we are as smart as first graders as nonprofits, we're not only going to pick our teammates wisely, but we're going to practice to develop our own skill sets as well. And the only way to do it is to do it. So then who are these teammates? Who do we need through? It needs to be your passionate stakeholders. Honestly, how great would it be, right, if we had a world full of people dressed like this in celebration of museums? And guess what? Museum attendance, according to AAM, is larger than all of professional sports combined. And I think it might even include some high-level college sports. That's what the bottom one is there in the United States of America. So we need to make sure that we're getting our institutional leadership, our staff, our various coalitions and networks, our professional associations. That, by the way, includes COSMA and your role in this. Who should be advocating? You should be advocating for them. Board members, friends groups, community partners. Think about any and all who could be advocating on that. But the thing about it is you've got to make it easier for the advocates. So you've got to ask them to help. You've got to educate them how, and you have to provide them the proper tools. So for example, I don't know if you know, but it's a little known fact that until Abraham Lincoln got his laptop, he was really struggling to write the Gettysburg Address. And then as soon as his advocates in the abolitionist movement got him that laptop, he was able to bang that thing out really quickly.
Ha ha ha, I'll laugh on behalf of everyone. Ha 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 ha.
Thank you, because I was struggling not to have any laughter for that one as we go through. Okay, so we're gonna move to a case for change. Knowing y'all's work like I do, and I do know it, I understand it, and I worked at a national association for a long time where we tried to get advocates rolling as well, is I was thinking about this presentation for y'all. And what I want y'all to do, if you go to the handouts, there's a 4-page called Articulating the Case for Change or Making the Case for Change or something like that. But it's a document that I want y'all to have. And what I want you to do is, when we're done with this, we're not doing this today, but I want you to go through and utilize this as your tool for how you will think about getting your museum community in your state engaged in advocacy. And whatever that may look like, what are the barriers and how it comes? Because the fact of the matter is, it's not enough that we have a noble cause. Museums do matter. We all know that. We do this either professionally or as volunteers, or as I call unpaid professionals. And we need to be more engaged in this. But we know that. We have to figure out how to get from the, oh, that's a good idea, to actually some sort of action. And we have to think about timing and audience readiness and supportiveness of the audience. You can't really go from nothing to full-fledged large-scale advocacy really easily, very quickly. So why do we have to make a case for change? I mean, biggest one is believing change is right is not enough. People just don't get motivated from that. We have to motivate those who don't see the need, including, by the way, those who just have no interest in it. It's a very powerful momentum. Inertia and ambivalence are very powerful opponents to the work that we do. We have to help understand those who oppose our desired change. Now, in our case, we're really not going to run into that in the model that I suggested, which is you think about advocacy in terms of your museum community in your state as you go through. We want to make sure, though, that we're using all the tools that we have, and we want to think about recruiting others in our effort. And we want to make sure, this is really important, that we get the right messages to the right offices. We have scarce resources, y'all, and probably one of the biggest ones is time. So we want to make sure that we're most efficient as we go through. We need to be good communicators. And, I've often heard, or my friend John Durrell used to say that Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech is one of the greatest vision statements in history. Where he literally spells out what his dream is for the future. And so I was thinking about this, like, what is an example of a good communication where it was the right message in the right medium, delivered by the right messengers? In this case, it was Dr. King, to the right audience. And that's how we have to think about it when we're plotting how we do advocacy. So my whole piece for y'all today is I want to not only inspire you to get this going in your state, but I also want to give you a tool that you can at least use it to help you work through any difficulties you have to get some advocacy, to get your people to start advocating for themselves as they go through. So you have the Case for Change Communications Toolkit in your hands, I hope, or on your computer. And you know, I think the biggest thing I want you to think about is the future is really in your hands right now. And now's our moment. We have to start doing it. I would suggest actually right now, one of the things that Janine, is it Craven Walker, Janine? I'm just blanked on her name. But told us when we did an advocacy presentation together at Western Museums Association is it's a good idea to get in touch with all the legislators who were just elected last month and write them a quick note. And I'll put this up in a template here in just a little bit. I'll share with everybody so that you can see. Getting that message across, you could send this out to your museums in your state and say, y'all need to do this. And it was a simple way of saying, congratulations on your election. We are XYZ museum who does XYZ work in XYZ. And it's a real easy communications piece. But I've given you some skills. I know I've raced through this and that was intentional. I didn't want to take up too much time today. To give you an idea, I'm happy to answer questions if there are questions for me. I think that I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen at this point. And I suppose, should I ask for questions?
You know what, Bob? I think let's go ahead and let Johnna do her part, and we'll ask for questions at the end. How about that?
Done.
All right.
And real quick, Jennifer, I'm going to send this little template to you in the text here so that you can post it, because it looks like I can't post it beyond that.
Okay. Well, thank you. Johnna, let's get you started.
Okay. All right. Is everyone seeing my stuff?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So like Ruth Ann said earlier, for those of you who haven't had a chance to speak with me yet, my name is Johnna McEntee, and I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio Museums Association. And I was really excited when Ruth Ann and the program committee asked me to speak today about OMA's advocacy activities. And though I am by no means an expert, I am very happy to share my experience and insight on a program that works well for our organization. So I know my main purpose today is to talk about OMA's Virtual Advocacy Day, but I wanted to give a little background as to how we got there and the general culture of advocacy within our organization. Advocacy is an important part of OMA's strategic plan. It's the main strategy in our visibility and relevance goal, which if you're interested in seeing the full plan, it's available in the About section at ohiomuseums.org. In addition to the advocacy resource page on the OMA website, our advocacy update that we do in every newsletter and during our annual business meeting at our spring conference, in-person advocacy days we do in partnership with our state history organization and state travel association, our involvement in Museums Advocacy Day in Washington, D.C., and the myriad other advocacy activities we engage in throughout the year. The Ohio Museums Association also holds our annual Virtual Advocacy Day, which we call Speak Up for Ohio Museums Day. So if advocacy is such an important part of OMA's mission, and we engage in so many other advocacy activities throughout the year, why don't we do an in-person advocacy day at the Ohio State House? Well, We used to, but due to dwindling participation by both museums and legislators, the in-person event known as Ohio Museums Day had its final year in 2001, as you can see from the wonderful 90s fashion that is exploding all over the screen right now. OMA still participates as partners in other in-person advocacy days on the state level, like I mentioned before, but as these events are focused on a particular sector of the museum world, either history-focused or tourism-focused, we as an organization wanted an event that was inclusive of the entire Ohio museum community and one that focused on the unique needs and challenges that face all museums. So, based on past participation at former in-person Ohio Museums Day, and because as a staff of one, my board and I recognized we had limited staff capacity and limited budget capacity and limited time for that matter. I'm sure many of you often feel like this poor Johnna analog in the picture here. We knew a solo OMA in-person event was out of the cards, but we didn't really know what other options were out there. And from that conundrum, Speak Up for Ohio Museums Day, our virtual world answer to in-person advocacy days, was born. And our first Speak Up Day was held in 2012, and we wrapped our 7th annual event October 1st of this year. But before we go any further, I want to say this is not the only way to do a virtual advocacy event. Every state is different, every SMA's capacity is different, and each state museum association and their constituency has different needs. So please don't think that your options are limited to the type of things I'm going to talk about today. OMA definitely does not hold the monopoly on virtual advocacy days, and I'm sure each of you will have great ideas on how to improve the event or new ideas for engagement, things we haven't even thought of yet. My goal today is just to give you a little more information about what we do and what has worked for us in the past. By holding a completely internet-based event, we could have a broad reach, connecting with museums and museum professionals throughout Ohio and beyond, meet people where they are, literally, by not requiring participants to take time away from the office or even time away from their desks, and also figuratively, by sharing a variety of activities and advocacy steps that are approachable for those with little or no advocacy experience, that they'll still feel comfortable dipping their toes in the water, but also by sharing tips and insights that are beneficial to seasoned advocates as well. Having a virtual event allows the resources to be accessible and searchable long after Speak Up Day is over. So if you want to see this year what Speak Up Day was all about, you can just search hashtag SpeakUpOhio. That's also the hashtag we use for all advocacy related activities, so you'll see more of that from OMA in February during Museums Advocacy Day. We also do a Twitter summary through a website called Wakelet, and that's a chronological timeline of the hashtag SpeakUpOhio posts from the event, and it's available to the public as well. And we can do it all with little to no overhead cost to OMA other than staff time. So what do we do and how do we make it work? Well, Speak Up Day is always held the first Monday in October to kick off National Arts and Humanities Month. So the date is different each year, but it's always held the same day, like Thanksgiving. The day is a social media blitz. We share resources, tips and tricks, advocacy inspiration from OMA, our board, and our members, as well as advice from former and current legislators and legislative staff, both on a state and national level. We utilize Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, our blog, and our website to engage and share information. And it's an all-day event, but we'll get into what that entails a little bit later. It's really all about the hashtag. In order to keep the information easily searchable and sometimes, and we hope, trending, we use hashtag SpeakUpOhio in all of our posts, announcements, emails. Everything that has to do with Speak Up Day has the hashtag plastered all over it. It's also important for our members and other participants to use that hashtag, otherwise we won't know that their posts are part of our Speak Up Day conversations. To explain the next bullet point a little bit, OMA also facilitates what we call our statewide roundtable. This is an initiative we started about 5 years ago where leaders from statewide arts and culture organizations can come together to talk about issues that are currently affecting their organization and the field. We'd all worked with one another in the past, but we never had everyone in the same room at the same time before. We try to meet at least twice a year, but we always work with those other statewide organizations to produce a current issue list. And this document has short 2 to 3 sentence descriptions of issues the other statewide organizations are working on or keeping an eye on, with links for more details. We also use these issues to help generate Speak Up Day posts and keep the issue lists available as a download on our advocacy page year-round. This helps us be inclusive of the larger arts and culture community within Ohio. It strengthens those partnerships, and it reminds our members that these other organizations are also helping to fight the good fight for museums. In addition to the text posts and resources OMA generates, we also create a photo story entirely from images and content submitted by our members. We started the photo story about 3 years ago, and each year participation almost doubles. I have an example of each year listed here, but we also have the links to the full photo stories from each of those 3 years in the handout section as well, if anyone's interested in taking a closer look. Starting in August each year, we do the call for photo submissions from our members. We ask for an image or images that demonstrate why they feel their museum matters. And we also have them include the exact wording they want us to use in crediting their institution, along with a brief 1 to 2 sentence description on how they believe museums impact their community. We also include our standard photo release language in that call for images. These photo story images are really impactful, and they're easy to share across all social media platforms. Our members love to use them for their own purposes after Speak Up Day, and through our photo release language, we're able to utilize these pictures and anecdotes for other OMA uses throughout the year as well. As I said, participation increases every year, so the photo stories seem to be a big hit. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. We do our promotional build-up just like we would any other professional development in-person events. We do save the date announcements in the newsletter for 2 months leading up to October, release our call for photo story images, email reminders about the date, social media reminders, blog posts, and event listings on our website. We also have to do the research, gather the resources and post materials that become the tweets and the posts, make sure our advocacy page is fully up to date, reach out to our roundtable members and ask for advocacy tips and tricks from our board, and create the photo story. Then I have to create the post content. And then is the fun part. We get to share all the great info. And when I said earlier it was an all-day event, I really meant it. We typically start our posts around 7 a.m. and go till about 8 p.m., and that's just with the OMA messaging. I continue to monitor and boost any user posts until I go to bed that night, and I also continue monitoring for user posts for the next few days, so anything that uses hashtag SpeakUpOhio. In 2018, OMA posted 260 tweets. That calculates to about 1 tweet every 5 minutes for over 13 hours, 81 Facebook posts, so about 1 every 6 minutes for 8 hours, and 66 Instagram posts, and that's about 1 every 8 minutes for 8 hours. So Facebook and Instagram users saw new updates throughout the workday, and Twitter users saw the full day's content. We also encouraged those on our non-Twitter platforms to check out our Twitter feed, and of course to use hashtag SpeakUpOhio in all their posts. In addition to those main platforms, we also put an announcement on our website and blog and do a morning and midday update on LinkedIn. The main thing is to customize the posts on the platform we're using. Instagram pretty much only gets our photo story images as posts. Facebook does well with images and longer form tips and resources, and Twitter is perfect for bite-size info as well as images. We cross-post a lot of the content, meaning we use the same images or text across the different platforms, but the key is to make sure you utilize each platform's features to best customize your message for that particular audience. The only way it's possible for one person to do all of this is through post scheduling. There is no way I'd be able to keep all the timing straight and keep all of the content and what posts to what platform and when straight without pre-scheduling as much as possible. There are free programs like TweetDeck, Hootsuite, and Buffer that'll help with this process, though there are limits to some of these programs, so if you have questions about any of those, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. If I'm able to have as many posts pre-scheduled as possible, that frees me up the day of to monitor my scheduled posts and make sure everything is posting properly, to boost any appropriate user posts that use our hashtag by liking or retweeting or reposting that content, and to monitor the hashtag to make sure things aren't going off the rails. When you post that many tweets in a day, for example, bots want to latch onto your account and start sending you messages or using the hashtag inappropriately, and they need to be blocked or reported. You also want to keep on the lookout for people that are hijacking the hashtag if it starts to get popular or to trend in a particular area, in case you need to report those abuses as well. So after doing this online advocacy event for 7 years, I've learned some things, often the hard way. So since we're all friends here, I wanted to share with you some insight I've garnered in case it saves you a headache or two if you decide to do something like this in the future. Preparation is key. Like I said in the last slide, there's no way I would be able to do this event if I had to do all the research and content creation and posting and monitoring the day of. It's tempting to think that because it's a virtual event and it doesn't need a physical space rented or catering or speakers confirmed, that it can come together in a snap. But just like any event we do, it takes time to get all the pieces lined up and to make sure all the details are in place to ensure the event's success. Make sure you give yourself plenty of time to plan and prepare. Participation will vary from year to year, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean the event isn't effective or that you aren't reaching your audience. The very nature of online events makes tracking participants more difficult and nuanced than audience tracking and evaluation at in-person or registered events. Especially for something like Speak Up Day, you might have a whole slew of what I call lurkers, people who are reading the content and like the content, but they aren't commenting or retweeting or liking. I know there are some Twitter chats and hashtags that I'm a lurker on, and it's really difficult to track passive users like that. Analytics like total timeline impressions and that sort of thing are helpful, but it still doesn't give you the full picture. And because you can't see the number of total likes or retweets shooting up from these passive users, it's easy to become discouraged that you're just shouting into the void. And this is where analytics and evaluation comes in. Even though it's a virtual event, evaluating the program and being able to benchmark participation and other analytical data from year to year is an important tool to make sure your messaging and approach is still effective. There are a lot of social media analytical tools available. Many have paid features, some are free. I like Keyhole and Social Alerts for analytics, and both of those have free options, but there are so many more out there. Something to keep in mind for free analytics tools is not to wait too long after the event before you start analyzing. Many of the free options only do tracking and analysis for the recent past, like the last 7 days. So give yourself a day or two for the hashtag activity to die down, and then start the analysis right away if you can. Another thing to remember is to be ready to adapt. You have to remember it's the internet, and by its very nature, things change rapidly. A popular social media platform you use for one online event might be completely obsolete by the time your next event rolls around. Or maybe that great platform that you loved this summer might only be used by high school students now, or another insular community or group. Be mindful and flexible, and know that change on the internet is inevitable. Along those same lines, don't worry about the occasional misuse of your hashtag. It's just the nature of the internet. People might see your hashtag and use it for something completely unrelated to your cause, or use it to troll, and that happens and you really don't have any control over it. But you also want to make sure your hashtag is not only relevant to your event or topic, but it isn't too generic that it can be easily hijacked by any random user for their own agenda. And I do have a story about that if we have time at the end, and if not, and you are interested in that story, give me a call and we will chat. Make sure you get your key players involved early and often. So this is your board, any social media influencers in your circle, that sort of thing. Make sure you have their buy-in and have them involved in any way you can, whether it's helping to create your post content or sharing the posts you've created, having them post their own message or messages to their social media and encouraging their followers to do the same. You'll have a broader reach. Their followers are most likely different from your followers, and you'll gain more organic content and posts that way. And the most important thing to remember, just like any advocacy activity we do, this is a long game. The key for OMA was really to make advocacy accessible and part of normal operations in the minds of our participants and our members and the field at large. The more we can demystify what advocacy means and how everyone can and should be part of museum advocacy, the better it will be for the field as a whole, and the easier it will be when there's an advocacy action that needs attention, either on a state or national level. So that's all I have. Thanks for letting me explain a bit about Speak Up for Ohio Museums Day. I know we have time for questions now, but if you think of anything after we wrap up, please feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have or talk a little bit more about anything that we discussed today.
Excellent. Thank you, Johnna. Thank you, Bob and Johnna. Okay, so we do have a little bit of time for questions, and I think we can do it two ways. One is if you raise your hand, click on your little hand thing there on our list of attendees, I can unmute you and let you ask your question if you're on the kind of computer or phone that will allow you to do that, or you can type it out in the question section and I will monitor that and pass that along. So do we have any questions? Let's see. Well, I tell you what, Johnna, while I'm trying to figure out if I'm missing anyone, why don't you tell us what you were going to tell us about the hijacking of the hashtag?
Oh, all right. Well, that's a great story. So when we first started Speak Up Day, we used hashtag Speak Up Ohio as a play on the name for the actual event itself. And that worked great for a couple of years. And then the advocacy committee thought, what if we do something a little bit more specific to Ohio's museums so that it's instantly recognizable as a museum event when you use the hashtag? So we started using hashtag Ohio Museums Matter, and that worked great for that year. But then that next summer is when Ferguson happened and when the Black Lives Matter movement started to really gain steam. And we didn't want to use our hashtag and make it seem like we were diminishing that movement in any way or that we were trying to piggyback onto that movement in any way. And so this goes back to the nature of the rapid change on the internet. Hashtag Black Lives Matter was so much bigger and had such a bigger audience and meaning than Ohio Museums Matter. And so even though we had used that in the past, we needed to change. And we changed back to hashtag Speak Up Ohio because it was synonymous with our brand. And it was also more inclusive, we realized, to the larger arts and culture community within the state. That's when we started to do our statewide roundtable. So we were able to connect with folks that even if they weren't necessarily, they didn't think of themselves as museums, but were still the larger arts and culture community, they could still be included in that conversation. So the interesting hijacking came along during the election of 2016. As you might know, Ohio is a pretty active battleground state for national elections. And with a hashtag like Speak Up Ohio happening a month before the national elections, there were some pretty potent political tweets that were using our hashtag for their own agenda. As I was starting to think of a plan to counteract that, I realized I didn't need to. The community was already doing it for me. There were so many folks that jumped on to the hashtag to say, hey, this has nothing to do with the election. This is about museums and the power of museums. And the community really shut down that hijacked activity so quickly that I didn't even have to do anything else. So it was a great learning experience for me, and it was also kind of reaffirming to show the power of our museum folks, and not only just the folks that work in museums, but the people who love museums too. So it was kind of, it turned a situation I thought could become dicey pretty quickly into a really heartwarming story for myself. So it might not be as exciting on the other side of it, but from my opinion, I thought that was a pretty interesting turn of events.
No kidding. Okay, well, the good news is I can now read the question. So from Claire in Michigan, what are the analytics sites that Johnna mentioned? Keyhole and something else? Johnna,
Yes.
what were your analytics?
I use Keyhole and social alerts, but there are so many others out there. And if you have a partnership with another organization that uses a lot of social media, they might have a paid analytics subscription to another platform. And if you can piggyback on top of that for just a hashtag or two throughout the year, you can really get some fantastic insights that way.
You know, I was thinking that that might make a really good topic for another kind of thing that we do. It could be a webinar. It could be sort of interesting. Okay, from our friend Matthew in Illinois. Hey, Matt, when will this be available on video, and can I share it with my committee? Yes, of course you may share it with your committee. And usually Jennifer gets them up on the COSMA website within the day. So by this time tomorrow, you should be able to send them to the COSMA website and have a look. All right, anybody else? Okay, will all the handouts be on the COSMA website? I'm not in a place I can download now. You know, I'm not sure how to answer that, Cindy. Yes, although I'm not sure we can put them in the same place as we have the videos. I may have to get back to you on that, or Jennifer may know, but we will make sure you get all those handouts. I promise. Can we share the handouts or post them? Bob, that's sort of up to you. I don't see why not. Can I unmute you, Bob? I mean, the reason we shared them with you is so that you could share them with your people. So I'm just going to say yes. Although if we're successful in getting them up on the COSMA website, it would be really easy just to go there. All right, so I'm watching the questions. Anybody else have a hand up? Let me see. Well, you all have been great. Let's see. Janice, if you're still there, I don't know what your question means about Jacine. You're going to have to tell me what that means. Otherwise, gosh, that may be it. Well, it is 3:54, and let me see if I can bring these people back for just a second so you guys can say thank you, and I may not be able to. Oh, that was the name of the person that Bob was trying to think of in his presentation, was Jacine. There she is, Jacine. Yes, from Utah. Jacine Craven Walker. That's her full name. That's who you were trying to quote, Bob. Hey, Bob, can you hit your little movie camera and let's bring you back? Or maybe not. Well, I tell you what, it has been a great day, and thank you all very much. I do want to put in a little plug about Museum's Advocacy Day, because I think it really is an important opportunity for us to learn how things are done. I think it makes it easier for you to plan things on a state level. So that, whoops, there I am, so that you can be more efficient in all of your advocacy efforts. Also, because I'm always looking out for COSMA, COSMA is going to have its annual meeting in Washington, D.C. in conjunction with Museum's Advocacy Day, probably on that Sunday afternoon, which is the 24th of February. We'll have a little bit more news about that later when we can confirm exactly when and where. But if you are on the fence about whether or not to come to Washington, just jump off the fence now and decide you're going to come. Really cheap fares on Southwest. I mean, you can get there. So, and we would love to see you. So on behalf of all of our speakers and everyone at COSMA who makes all this possible, thank you and Merry Christmas. Send us your questions. Bye-bye.